Close your eyes for just a moment. Imagine the world completely silent. No cities, no voices, no fire on the horizon. Just ash. Endless, suffocating ash. The sky has turned the color of a bruise. Dark purple, poisoned, blocking out the sun. The temperature is dropping. Animals are dying. Rivers are freezing over in places that have never known winter. And somewhere on the eastern edge of Africa, a small group of humans, maybe just a few thousand, are huddled together, terrified. They don't know it yet, but they're the last humans on Earth. And every single person alive today, every one of us, is descended from those survivors. So what happened? What nearly wiped us out completely? What force was so catastrophic that it reduced our entire species to a number smaller than the population of a small town? And how did a handful of terrified, starving humans somehow hold on against every possible odd and give rise to 8 billion people? The answer is buried in our DNA. It is written in the rocks of a dead volcano, and it is one of the most extraordinary survival stories ever told. This is not ancient mythology. This is not legend. This actually happened to your ancestors, to mine, to all of us. If you find yourself drawn to the hidden chapters of human history, the stories that schools never taught you, then you're in the right place. Subscribe now, because we go deep here. 74,000 years ago, on the island we now call Sumatra in Indonesia, something ancient was waking up. Beneath the surface of a quiet lake, a lake so large it would one day be called Toba, a supervolcano had been building pressure for centuries. Not a regular volcano, not the kind that destroys a single city. A supervolcano, the most violent geological force on the face of the earth. On an ordinary morning, with no warning, it erupted. The explosion was so massive it could be heard, if anyone had been listening, from thousands of miles away. In a matter of hours, it ejected nearly 3,000 cubic kilometers of rock, ash, and superheated gas into the atmosphere. To put that into perspective, the Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980, which made global headlines, ejected just 1 cubic kilometer of material. Toba ejected 3,000 times more. In a single event. In a single day. Within days, a thick blanket of volcanic ash had spread across South Asia, the Indian Ocean, and deep into Africa. In some parts of India, the ash layer was 6 meters deep. 6 meters, nearly 20 feet, of gray, lifeless powder burying everything. But the ash on the ground was not the worst of it. The worst was what happened to the sky. Billions of tons of sulfur dioxide were blasted into the stratosphere, forming a chemical veil around the entire planet. Sunlight was reflected back into space. Temperatures on Earth's surface plummeted. Some estimates suggest the planet cooled by up to 15 degrees Celsius in just a matter of years. This was not a winter. This was a volcanic winter, a years-long darkness that starved ecosystems, collapsed forests, and froze rivers that had flowed freely for millennia. Plants died first, then the animals that ate them, then the animals that ate those animals. The food chain collapsed, level by level, like a tower of stone falling in slow motion. And in the middle of all of this, cold, starving, ash-covered, and terrified, were us. Homo sapiens, barely 70,000 years into our existence as a species. We had not yet spread across the globe. We had not yet built anything. We were still young, fragile, small-brained by modern standards, and deeply vulnerable. Genetic scientists, studying the DNA of every human being alive today, have discovered something astonishing buried deep in our genome. There's a point in our genetic history where human diversity almost completely disappears, where the variation in our DNA collapses to almost nothing. It is called the genetic bottleneck, and it happened approximately 70,000 years ago, right when Toba erupted. The evidence suggests that the total breeding population of Homo sapiens, the number of humans actually reproducing and surviving, may have dropped to as few as 3,000 individuals. Some estimates say even fewer. 3,000 people on the entire planet. That is not a civilization. That is barely a village. We were, by every scientific measure, functionally on the edge of extinction. So how do they make it? How does a species reduced to a few thousand cold, starving individuals survive a decade-long volcanic winter? The answer, scientists believe, lies in the one place humans have always found their greatest strength: each other. The survivors were almost certainly in East Africa, specifically in coastal and river valley regions where food sources were slightly more protected from the climate collapse. Shellfish along coastlines, underground tubers that survived the ash, freshwater sources fed by rivers rather than rainfall, small, critical pockets of food in an otherwise dead world. And they shared, they cooperated, they taught each other, they took care of the weak and the young. Because a species that abandons its weakest members does not survive a catastrophe like this. Over generations, slowly, painfully, the population began to recover. The volcanic winter faded. The sky began to clear. The green began to return. And those few thousand souls, carrying their stories and their grief and their stubborn will to live, began to rebuild. Here is what makes this story personal. What makes it more than just ancient geology or academic genetics? Every human being alive today, regardless of where you were born, what language you speak, what you believe, carries the genetic signature of that bottleneck. We are, all of us, remarkably similar at the genetic level, far more similar than most other species on Earth. Chimpanzee populations in a single African forest show more genetic diversity than all 8 billion humans combined. We are one family, forged in fire, in ash, in a darkness that lasted years. Descended from survivors who refused to give up in the worst moment our species has ever faced. That is not a metaphor. That is biology. That is your actual inheritance, written into every cell of your body. 74,000 years ago, we almost didn't make it. The volcano nearly won. But somewhere in East Africa, a small group of humans looked at the gray sky, felt the cold in their bones, and chose to keep going. They kept the fire alive. They kept each other alive. And because of them, because of that impossible stubbornness in the face of extinction, you are here, right now, watching this. Think about that the next time the world feels overwhelming. You come from people who survived the end of the world, and they did it with nothing but each other. Now I want to hear from you. If an event like Toba happened today, do you think modern civilization would survive it? Tell me in the comments below. If this story moved you, if it made you see yourself differently, hit that like button and subscribe. Every week we go deeper into the hidden chapters of who we really are. And stay close, because in part 2, we follow those survivors out of Africa and into the rest of the world. The journey that came next was just as extraordinary, just as dangerous, and just as human.